What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So this is another requested video, and I want to emphasize that these are just opinions, man. This isn't something etched in stone. These are not facts. Just opinion. You know, you can have a very different opinion in mine, but it's just these are just things people have asked me. So someone wanted to ask me who did I think was a better coach between Don Nelson and Doc Rivers. First of all, they both have similar sounding names to a certain extent, with same syllables. Doc Rivers, Don Nelson. Both of them were, I would say, better than average role players. Not great, but better than average role players. Long coaching careers. Man, I want to say Don Nelson coached for, 30 years at least. And Doc's been coaching for pretty much a quarter of a century. Doc got a head start, though, a little bit, though, because Doc's been coaching, I think, since he was 30. I know his first year was, I think, that 99 abbreviated season. So that was when he was, 38? No, he wasn't even 38 yet. He was 37. Yeah, so Doc's been coaching for a long time, man. Now, of course, he's in his early 60s. That's still relatively young by today's standards, you know what I'm saying? That's still not that old. You know, you got guys coaching in the NBA into their 70s. Shit, our president is 81, so it's not that old. Let's look at the accomplishments resume. For Doc Rivers, let's go with Don Nelson first. Don Nelson, he's a 5-time NBA champion as a player. Well, let's not look at players. Look at the coach. Let's look at coaches. Because he played with Boston for quite a while, so he won a lot of titles with Boston as a player. But let's look at the coach. He's a 3-time NBA Coach of the Year, 83, 85, and 92. 2-time NBA All-Star Game head coach, 1992 and 2002. He was on the initial top 10 coaches in NBA history list that came out back in 1998. He's considered a top 15 coach in NBA history, the more recent list. Won 1,335 games, lost 1,063 for a 55.7% win percentage. And he won the FIBA gold medal, the FIBA World Championship in Toronto back in 1994. I believe he was the head coach for that team. Let's look at Doc. Now, already we know that Doc won a championship. You can give the credit to Tom Thibodeau, but Doc won a championship. Back in 2008, he was the coach of the year back in 2000, in 99-2000. 4-time NBA All-Star Game head coach, 2008, 2011, 2021, and 2024. Is considered top 15 coach in NBA history. And they don't have his wins and losses. FIBA World Cup. No, those was he was a player. Let's see. Overall, Doc has 1,090. Well, this cuts out with Philadelphia, so you got to include now. He has 1,098 victories, 766 defeats, for roughly a 59% win percentage. So he has a considerably higher win percentage than Don Nelson. Now, a lot of people are going to say that Doc Rivers coached a lot of great players, and there's truth to that. Earlier on in his career, he coached a young Ben Wallace but that was before he became really Ben Wallace. He coached Tracy McGrady, Paul Pierce, obviously. Later on, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen and Rajon Rondo. He coached Chris Paul, Blake Griffin. By the way, I think Blake's out the NBA, man. If I'm not mistaken. This is crazy how you go from a star to out the league. That's crazy. Uh, um, DeAndre Jordan. Then later on, of course, he coached Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. Uh, then, of course, he coached Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, James Harden. Now he's coaching Dame Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. All right, so there's that. But there's another thing people got to look at too. And I got to make sure that I see this correctly. Looking at it right now. Yeah, I'm checking right now before. Yeah. So, in seasons where Doc coached a full year, he only had a losing record twice. And that was in Boston back in 2005, 2006, and 2006 and 2007. Now, when he was fired from Orlando, that was in 11 games. They were 1-10. But, I mean, he's only missed the playoffs 4 times in his career. His initial year in Orlando, that team wasn't very good. The best scorer was Darrell Armstrong. You can't count 2004 because he was fired after 11 games. Missed the playoffs in 06 and 07. And last time he missed the playoffs was 2018 with the Clippers. And I think with some of them years, it was one of the problems was injuries. At least a couple of those years was injuries. So it's not totally his fault. Now let's look at Don Nelson. Don Nelson coached Milwaukee. He missed the playoffs. Let's see. He coached Milwaukee from 1976 all the way to 87. Then Golden State from 88 to 95. Then 1 year in New York. And then Dallas from 97 to 05. And then Golden State again from 2006 to 2010. So he coached, what is that, 34 years. He coached 34 years. Also, I want to mention something else here. Doc is working on his 25th year, right? And he has close to 1,100 victories. Doc may end up becoming the all-time leader in wins in coaching because he's only 62. So when he reaches his 30th year, he'll still only be in his, approaching his late 60s. Now that's not saying he's going to coach that long, but he should be way up there in the wins column when everything's said and done. Anyway, Don Nelson missed the playoffs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. 10 times. And he resigned his last year at Dallas. And he was fired from the Knicks in 96. And he resigned from Golden State in 95. So let's look at the talent that he's coached. And I'm going off what I remember, the players I remember being on his team. So Milwaukee, he coached, let's see, Paul Pressey. He coached Marquise Johnson. He coached Jack, was it, no, not Jack Sikma yet. Was Sikma there yet? I can't remember. Was he there in 86, 87? I can't recall whether Sikma was there by then, but he coached those two guys. Let's see, Terry Cummings. He coached, who else was there? Sidney Moncrief. You know what I'm saying? He coached some guys in Milwaukee. There was some talent there. I told you in the 80s, They were the best team in the 1980s not to make it to an NBA Finals. In 1945, when they played the Bulls in the first round, they won 59 games that year. Then he goes to Golden State. That's Run TMZ. That's Chris Mullin in his prime. That's a young, explosive Tim Howard before the knee injury. That's a young Mitch Richmond. That's a great team, offensively at least. He coached them. Then later on, of course, he coached a young Chris Webber. Then in New York, 95-96, that's Pat Ewing. That's Charles Oakley. That's John Starks. That's Anthony Mason. You know what I'm saying? Derek Harper. Then he goes to Dallas. Now, Dallas wasn't very good at first. But then later on, of course, you had Dirk Nowitzki. You had Steve Nash. You know what I'm saying? A little later on, Michael Finley. Then he goes back to Golden State. So you have the We Believe team with Baron Davis and Jason Richardson and Steven Jackson and those guys. Then, of course, you have a young Steph Curry. So he and Monte Ellis. So he coached a lot of great players. And there's some guys I'm just forgetting out of the top of my head. So he coached a lot of great players too. So look, Doc had stacked teams, but so did Don Nelson. What I remember about Don Nelson was his teams were always great offensively, but they had issues on the defensive end. For the most part, that was always the issues with Don Nelson's teams. They were either great offensively, average defensively, or great offensively and porous defensively. Doc Rivers seems to have a bit more of a balance. All right. Now he did have, yes, he has had a lot of blown leads. That's the main thing people like to bring up, right? Yeah, he got all these blown leads, and that's true. And I've held it against him to a certain extent, right? But with Don Nelson, there were some chokes as well. You know what I'm saying? There were some chokes. With as good as that Milwaukee Bucks team was, they never made it to an NBA Finals. And they consistently got lost in the conference finals. They lost in the conference finals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9 times, excuse me. They lost in the conference finals 9 times. They never could get past the Celtics, or early on, they couldn't get past the Bullets. They could never get over the hump. So Don Nelson had his critics too. Matter of fact, Don Nelson lost in the conference finals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 times. And Don Nelson never, unlike Doc Rivers, who made it to the NBA Finals twice, he never made it to an NBA Finals in 34 years of coaching. So as great as Don Nelson was, maybe even I've been underrating Doc Rivers. Maybe we maybe we got recency bias in a bad way. We forget some of these other coaches' failures. We forget some of these other coaches did have stacked teams. So, I've been saying I thought Doc Rivers was a top 30 coach, and maybe he wasn't top 10, top 15, but I think maybe I've been underestimating him. Maybe he is top 15. So anyway, that's just my take on it, man. Tell me what you guys think.